What is up, my friends? We are here on another episode of Level After Next podcast, where every week we're going to be your accountability. We're going to give you the inspiration. We're going to hopefully make you laugh a little bit. And at the end, you're going to have every desire to go forth and slay. So let's do this. What is up, friends? I'm so excited. I get to introduce you today to Jake Stahl. And Jake, I have to be honest, I like to pride myself in knowing things, but the whole fractional, this whole new idea of fractional thing, I keep hearing it and I'm like, dang it, I'm missing something. Kind of, it seems like it might be important because lots of people have brought this up lately. So
yeah,
I can't wait to like get into that with you. I know that you have all kinds of just different program support, ways for people to get in touch with you, learn from you. Can we go back a little bit to the beginning though? Because
Sure.
I know you also have like quite the story, and on Level After Next, I feel like the story is what people really connect with most often. And it's a huge piece of what gets so many to this like success level too. But for those who are going through it and still dream big, I always think that it's just so worthwhile for them to get to hear, you know, from our guests, kind of how they got here, what they've been through, and how it's really driven them.
Sure. I was in sales for most of my early career, and I was with 4 major companies for sales. And I was number 1 in 3 of the 4, still a little upset about the 4th one. And at one of the jobs, one of my managers asked if I'd be willing to train people. And being young and naive, I said, well, sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. The only issue with that was I had no idea what made me successful, let alone how to transfer that knowledge. So, Katie, I can honestly tell you that over the past 30 years, I've been trying to figure out ways to help people, other people be successful. Because I'd always heard, well, there's 5 or 10 traits of successful people. And Katie, I just don't think that's true. I think there's various mixes and formulas, and there's all sorts of alchemy that takes place to create a successful person. So that's what I spent my life doing. So I got a degree in psychology. I have multiple certifications in neurolinguistic programming. I really just like trying to figure out what makes other people tick, and probably more importantly, still trying to figure out what makes me tick.
Yeah, I think that is huge in any area of entrepreneurism, leadership, business, life in general, right? I feel like so often we really at any level will compare to what something that somebody else does, something that it seems like they have innately, when so much of success is really built on building and learning and growing.
Yeah.
And so I love the idea. I mean, just reading through your background and some of the things that you shared that you've really focused on, this idea of neurolinguistic programming, cadence of conversation, the impact that has. I feel like it's something that I probably need to deep dive into because I'm really great at like my own cadence.
Sure.
I need to get into more of like a conversational cadence with people. So what were some of your biggest findings, and what was it that really drew you into this area?
Well, I think the thing that got me into it, and this is going to sound really weird, but I was always hung up on the greeting, hi, how are you? It largely means very little unless it's somebody that you're connected to. And people have a very conditioned response. It's almost like you're asking a question where the other person's already got a canned response. And I used to think to myself, there's got to be a better way to start a sales conversation. And a lot of it then, Katie, led me down the road of listening being more important than talking. And can you, in fact, listen 80% of the time and still do an effective sales call or an effective conversation in general, whether it's with your significant other or a parent or a child? And what I found was that not only is the cadence of a conversation important, and I teach this a lot in what I do, but also the way we're conditioned and the way we perceive each other is super important. And I don't think we take that enough into consideration when we talk to other people. My feeling is that in general, we talk without pre-planning it out, and then we just use our ability to backtrack later if we need to. And I just often wonder what would happen if we kind of did that the other way around, if we thought more about what we said to eliminate that backtracking.
I completely agree. I don't remember what the training was in, but it was on communication. And it just is one of those things that stuck with me. And I've talked about it often on the podcast and my blog because it just was just such a huge wow moment where, you know, a very small percentage of the time we actually say what we mean to say.
Yeah.
Like the words that come out are not exactly what we have in our head. And then, so you've got this telephone message going on in between just two people. So there's what I would like to say, what I actually say, then what that person hears and how they perceive it.
Yeah.
And what I really loved about really the point of that training was without two people being willing to recognize that their perception isn't exactly truth, it's hard to have that conversation in general. But if you, would you say, are on one end of it and understand it, where, you know, you're one taking time to say what you mean and what you would like to say, and then giving grace for the other and listening, do you think that you can really improve sales just on that one side then, and improve really any kind of communication, even though it's really just one-sided understanding of how that process works?
Right. And I do. And let's unpack that just for a minute. So, Katie, what if we could understand their perception quickly and easily? What if we could understand their communication style and understand the way they like to assimilate information? And what if we could do it in a couple of minutes? And all we would have to invest is time enough to listen, parse it out, and then adapt our own skill to talk to them. And that's really what kind of the training method I've come up with is you have an adaptive conversational blueprint. So you take that time to understand. And this is largely neurolinguistic programming based, right? We understand the modality they think in. We understand, do they try to think in terms of past, present, or future? How associated are they with it? How do they frame things? And this sounds super complicated, but the reality is if you listen carefully and just ask a couple of questions about how they are and what their goals are for the future and what their business looks like, you can parse that out and understand it pretty quickly. So a lot of what I teach is how do you do that within a couple of minutes of talking to someone? So your sales pitch is actually geared towards what they want and what their objectives are and what the goals are that they're associated with, and make it matter. Not just this, hey, Katie, it's Jake. I've got this to sell you. Here's what I have to offer. Are you interested?
Yeah, I think this is amazing. Can you give us like an example?
Yeah, sure. So think about it this way. If you were to ask a friend of yours, if you were to say to them, close your eyes, you walk into a field, there's a tree. Tell me about the scene. That friend is going to go through a description and they might say, wow, the leaves are green and the lake is a beautiful blue and I love the skies. They're a visual processor. So when you sell to them, you want to sell to them from the point of view of what they can see and what they can imagine. Or they might say, you know what, Katie, I hear the babbling brook right by the tree and God, the wind's rustling through the leaves. So you have a primarily auditory person. As soon as we start to parse out some of these modalities, then we can start to communicate in the way they like to communicate. So if you're visual, Katie, I might say, so Katie, when you see the future, what does it look like? Or if you bought my product, what does success look like? So I can start to talk in your language. And of course, we can't say to them, okay, Mr. Customer, please close your eyes and see a tree in the field and describe it to me. But if you talk enough about them and let them talk enough about themselves, the words you can pull from their language give you very clear markers of what appeals to them most. And what's the favorite topic of anybody on the planet? Themselves, right? So if I can act like them,
I was gonna say our kids, but I mean it's kind of the same.
right. So if we can act like them and talk like them, and we can see that us as themselves, if they can see a piece of themselves in us, think about how quickly that binds you to that person. And then when I do get to my message, wow, what a difference. But it takes time, it takes training to do this, and it takes you giving up 3 to 5 minutes of just listening to them talk to make this happen.
You know, as someone who helps train a large sales force, it's interesting to me, and this is what I love so much about kind of podcasting and just getting to really network and meet so many different kinds of people, is that you just took what I've been trying to like train people on using really impossible to understand concepts, you know?
Yeah.
Making it sound like it's more of a gift than it is just a skill that is, I mean, I'm sure that it's far more in depth than you have this blueprint that I want everything to do with, but even just what you explained clarifies so much. People oftentimes, especially new to sales, will go in and just do, I mean, sometimes just copy and paste or just like
Right.
say the script, right?
Yep.
And here, I mean, yes, and it should be about them. If it's not about them, then I think that, you know, you're probably in sales for the wrong reason. But but it should be about them, right?
Yes.
No, this is, I love this and I appreciate this for my own sake and the people who I work with sake, but also for everybody who's listening. So when you talk about your blueprint and, you know, how you work with people, what is it like? What does that look like? And what kind of, you know, support is there and ways to train are there?
Yeah. So the blueprint basically says the first thing you need to do is understand a person's perception. So when they get on the phone with you, they have a series of preconceived notions that come up, right? And then we talk about conditioning. How are we conditioned to respond? And one thing that your listeners can probably relate to if we think about conditioning is remember the last time your cell phone lit up and you looked at the number and you went, oh my God, I just don't have time for this person. And I'd be willing to bet everybody listening to this can picture that person. They know their name, they can see their face. That's conditioning. So when the phone rings at a business and they pick up and we say, hey, it's Jake, how are you? That conditioning kicks in. And here come the responses lined up just in really a solid pecking order. It's, I've already got 2 of those. I'm not interested. Next quarter, it costs too much. The contract's too large. You know, so all of that conditioning lines up. So the blueprint says, understand their perception of you, understand what they're conditioned to say. And now let's talk about how to just kind of put a break in that conditioning. So here's an example, Katie. If you pick up the phone and I say, hi, how are you? It's Jake. The conditioning kicks in. Salesperson, what are they going to offer me? How much is it? But what if you picked up and I said, Katie, I am so glad you picked up the phone. I've listened to your podcast a number of times. I think you're dynamite. I literally couldn't wait to talk to you. Now, where does that conversation go? All of a sudden, you're asking me questions and I'm hearing your talk and I'm listening to your modalities. So now I can adapt my conversation to you and we can start to be as one, for lack of a better term. Because if you like me, you're going to listen to what I have to say.
And it feels like there's like also a little bit of acceptance of their perception.
Of course.
And that, I think, has a huge impact as well.
Right. And think about it also in this way when it comes to perception. When, let's say somebody wants to, I don't know, let's say lose weight. And your first response is, hey, I know some supplements you can take. Well, if they're not a supplement taker or they hate taking pills, their perception of success is going to be 10%. But if you say to them, hey, let me show you a kettlebell, and they're like, oh my God, I love to exercise, their perception is going to shift to 90%. So the idea of the call is, how do I get it so that I can increase their perception of success? And part of that is how I pose my product, right? So it's a step-by-step process on how to get to that sales message. But again, this means you leave your ego at the door. It's not about you, and it's all about the person on the other end of the phone.
So, a lot of times, a lot of sales are going on, via text, email, online. Right. And so how do you feel the best way to kind of like cater this to the spaces where these conversations are really happening more in like a text type area, messengers and Instagram and stuff like that?
Excellent question. My advice, and this is something I've used for years and it works great, is do not talk about you or your product for the first 3 or 4 outreaches. So Katie saw you had a podcast, looking to podcast myself. Any advice you can give? Because advice is flattery, right? You're smarter than I am. Please give me advice. The next one might be, what's your verticals? Is there any verticals you work in? Is there any way I can help you? And then in the third reach out, it may be, hey, Katie, I'm really enjoying getting to know you better. Thank you. What can I do to help you? Can I support you on LinkedIn? Can I rate your podcast? What can I do? And a little miracle happens, Katie. If you hold out for the miracle, it does happen. And according to my calculations, it's about 85% of the time. If I ask about you enough, eventually you go, wow, Jake, I've talked about me a ton. Tell me about you and what you do. Then all of a sudden, you're receptive to my message. And this is why Instagram, texting, DMing is the perfect environment for this. I now have you writing all about yourself. I can now discern your modality, how you like to think, what your needs are. Now I can present to you. But again, this is ego aside, hold you and the great things you do back and wait for that invitation. And 85% of the time it will come.
I completely agree. And I think that a lot of times, and for any of you listening who are in sales or doing anything, especially in the online realm, which most people are to some extent, right? We want that, here it is, buy. Here it is, right. Buy. And I struggle so much with so many people who are frustrated because, they presented something, the link wasn't clicked, it wasn't purchased, they seemed interested. And this is exactly what's missing from all of that.
Yeah.
And for so many reasons, it seems important, not just to get the sale, but for that person to feel supported and understood prior to spending money that a lot of people don't have a ton of right now. Right. And I love that you kind of have this, not just a system, but statistics that I believe personally, that, you give it a while. Let them teach you who they are and how you really can best serve them. It's fascinating, and I would say it's 100% true.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw out a controversial statement.
I love that. I love controversy.
Okay, so I am going to say, after doing this for 30 years, across 6 countries, I can say conclusively, in my opinion, that anybody who treats sales as a math game, you're missing the point. So when I work with a company and they say, hey, Jake, we're closing like 1 out of every 25 people, sales is not a math game. If you're thinking in terms of, if I just dial 25 times or send 25 emails, I'm going to get somebody, you're missing the point of sales entirely. We don't think of anything else like this, Katie. I don't think I'm going to visit 25 grocery stores before I buy a loaf of bread. I don't think I have to date 365 people before I find my soulmate. We don't think of anything else like this. And yet for some odd reason in sales, we buy into it 100%. And I do not get it at all. And the companies who let me work with them, we transform everything. Do we close 100%? Not even close. But do better than the stats are doing? Oh yeah, way better.
Yeah, I stand out like a sore thumb because I am very much against the making the lists and, reaching out to 100 people and just throwing mud at a wall, and, expecting the lowest outcomes. I think that what it seems like you're talking about is something that I really resonate with a lot, and that's quality over quantity.
Yeah.
And I I think, yeah, this is amazing. How hard is it when you're working with a corporation, where it's one thing to teach an individual, but when
Mm-hmm.
you're really shifting the mindset of a corporation, of a large business, what does that look like for you?
Well, I've worked with the Ford Motor Companies and Quest Diagnostics and Men's Warehouse. I've done the corporations, and I don't do them anymore. And it's not that they're not good companies. I completely respect their business models. They make a lot of money, so they're doing something I'm not. However, it's like steering a battleship. It's very difficult to get them to turn around. So most of my clients are either 500 people and less, or they're individual clients. I get individual salespeople. I even get CEOs that come and say, how do I talk to my people? Why aren't I selling well to venture capitalists? And we walk through their messaging and we help them understand the process. So I prefer to work with smaller companies so that they're a little bit more agile, a little bit more willing to switch on a dime or try something different.
Well, you're shifting a culture essentially, and
Good point.
that is a hard thing to do, I would imagine, with a company, something as large and vast as these larger, Ford and Men's Warehouse and these larger
Right.
corporations. Um, but shifting a culture can be absolutely game changing and incredible. So I think, um, I just I just have such a love hate relationship with sales. If I'm going to be controversial here,
I get it. 100%.
it
I
breaks
don't
my
even like the
heart.
word.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It breaks my heart to see
Yeah.
how it goes, and then that some of these kind of ickier practices are what people see the quick return on, and so they stick around. It's how people teach one another. In the sales world, you get people who succeed on accident, and so they kind of turn around and teach worse practices. And so I just think, um, I love everything about this blueprint and the way that you have it, even just what you've explained today. I've been taking lots of notes, by the way.
Thank you. It's very kind.
So I'm like, when I'm looking down, I'm not on my phone. I'm like writing. But no, I think it just needs to be done. I think that this needs to become more of what is happening in sales because it's only becoming more and more competitive out there, right?
Yeah. And there's a certain danger that's coming in with AI and the marketing automation is we get into our heads that one out of every 100 emails gets a click. So we have to send out 600,000 emails to make this happen. When the reality is, I've worked with email marketing companies and we've changed their messaging. We based it on common NLP practices, and their return on clicks has skyrocketed. So I think we just need to understand it's not about the volume that we produce of the sales message, it's the sales message itself. And that can be tailored and tweaked. But God, to solve it by just increasing the amount of emails you send out or putting 8 marketing automations into effect is maddening. I got something on LinkedIn today. It said, I looked at your impressive profile and I'm reaching out to female business owners like you. So it's like you're going to need to tweak that automation a little bit in order to be successful. I just, it saddens me that we're going for volume and not quality and not a combination of the two.
Well, so in email marketing, let's go there for a minute.
Sure.
How would you say like provide more value? Like how do you then shift this and adjust it for if you are sending emails, even to say, 100 people.
Right. So the way I suggest people do it is make the first couple of emails about the company. So make it about the person and allow them to open it and see that there's interest. And of course, you want to do a call to action. Don't get me wrong, but you want to do it in a subtle way so that it's not an overt sales message. We all have four basic needs. We have a dream outcome for anything we do, right? Anything we do, we have an idea in mind of how that's going to turn out. The second thing is we have a perception of how likely we are to achieve that, right? So let's use the lose weight thing. So my dream is to fit into a Speedo and have everybody look at me and admire me. That's not my dream, by the way, but let's say it is. Then my perception of being able to do that is 2% at best. The third thing people want to know is how long after I buy something am I going to see the effect of it? So how long is it going to take to get a return? And then the last piece is how much effort am I going to have to put into it? If I can create messaging that gets them to know that they're important to me and solves these four dilemmas, the difference in response rate is phenomenal. And I've got the data to prove it. I've worked with companies where we've done just this. And, you know, if you're, Katie, I would imagine with how popular your podcasts are and the things you do, your inbox is probably full. So you're only going to address the emails that grab your attention with a subject line. Many people don't pay attention to the subject line. And that is so, so important. Do you know they actually did studies and they found out of all the sign-offs you can do on an email, like sincerely or thanks for your time, the word best with a comma yields by far the greatest results?
Really?
Things like this matter.
Yeah.
And yet we are content to have AI develop a series of 4 email reach outs and we don't give it a second thought.
So when it comes to, because honestly, when it comes to subject lines, I've just learned not to trust them because I feel like the best subject lines tend to be like filled with, yeah, just something that I'm not interested in. But I'll be like,
Exactly.
oh, that made me think, but I'm deleting it before I even open it.
Yeah.
And I think for me, yeah, I am a consumer. I think like a consumer, and then I try to shift my business to how I act as a consumer often. But I mean, what would it be as far as subjects? How do you have somebody open an email and know that you have value for them inside?
Well, it's obviously going to depend on the product and it's going to depend on the offering. So if you have something, let's say you're an email marketer, maybe the subject line is, and I'm just pulling this out of the hat, but let's say it's case study. My emails generated a 45% increase in revenue. And again, it's just really off the top of my head. I'd have to work on it for whatever product it was. But if people aren't going to even open the email, the subject line has to communicate what's in it. I always tell people, listen, tell me your marketing message and then shrink it so it fits on a bumper sticker. And that's your subject line. And that's the way people's elevator pitches should be too.
Yeah.
What do you do? Now fit it on a bumper sticker. And that's your approach.
I like that. That should probably be like my life, like any conversation goal is to just whatever comes out of my mouth needs to fit on a bumper sticker.
Well, you may have something more valuable to offer than the length of a bumper sticker.
Just listen, Katie, until it's your turn. I'm like the tell you my life story at a baseball party person, not good at small talk. No, but I love and agree. And I think that this is so, so important. And it's exactly the direction that I hope not just to see sales go, because I think that I don't want this business, any business, to be just about numbers, and the companies that I love to work with are those that are clearly caring about the individuals over the numbers. And there's not a lot of them, but you recognize them, right?
Yep.
And I just, I think that not only does it improve, or I would assume, I feel as though it improves sales, it improves, output, it improves everything on the number side, but also, in my opinion, it makes sales a lot more approachable for the normal person as well. Because I don't know how many times I hear people say, I'm just not a salesperson. And what are they thinking of,
Yeah, I
right?
hear it all the time. Yep.
It's simply them not wanting to be the gross salesperson. Somebody's got to sell stuff. And there is a way to do that while keeping the consumer number one. And if at the end of those 3 to 4 reach outs, how do you work with and coach people when the answer is simply no?
Well, if the answer is no, half of sales, no, let's rephrase that. 80% of sales is knowing when you're just barking up the wrong tree. So when you know when to stop, like if you've talked about somebody else for 3 or 4 messages and they're still not interested in hearing about you, then you know what? They go in the do not connect bin. Because there's plenty of people that do want to reciprocate and will get you to that stage. Because think about this, Katie. If I get somebody who's only interested in themselves and what they do and they've got no room for anything else, is that somebody I want to work for?
Right.
It's not anybody I'd be interested in working with. So it's also kind of a filter for your clients. I personally feel that firing a client is a lot harder than gaining a client. So I don't want to get into that position.
No, completely. And then how often do you feel as though no can be just a not right now?
Well, and that could be another whole podcast in itself, right? I'm a firm believer that an objection is really just a question. So if somebody says to me, wow, that price is high, what they're really saying is, I'm interested enough to give you the objection. Can you do something about the price? Or the contract is too long. They're not saying, I don't want to do it. They're saying, if the contract were a little bit different, I may be willing to walk through that door. So one of my biggest pet peeves about sales training is when people say, okay, now we're going to address answering objections. That shouldn't be a phase of sales, right? It should be just if somebody has an issue, you deal with it, but you deal with it in a way they want it dealt with, not in some sales playbook you had printed out and, oh, Katie, let me wait till I get to page 9 because that's where the answer to this objection is. It's really relating to that customer. So there are times a no is a no, and you need to respect that. And it's not based on number of reach outs, it's based on your gut feel. There are a lot of times when I'm talking with somebody that they give me an initial objection and we talk it through. And they're like, wow, I'm really glad we talked about that because I thought A and it was really B. And that's what sales is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. They're interested enough to give you an objection. I think
Yeah.
it's huge and it's so true. And I know that with a lot of people who are newer to sales and marketing, that like objection or the negativity towards the price or the time involved or whatever it is, kind of just instead of realizing the opportunity there, our immediate responses to just like crash and feel as though we failed.
Right.
When you're really, they haven't blocked you. You're still in that conversation, right?
And listen, in saying this, I don't want to say that you be dogged about it because there are some objections that have a question hidden that I can't answer.
Right.
So maybe it's, hey, listen, I was looking to go with somebody half your price. Okay, so I know your objection and it's noted, but I can't do half price. So it's a question that I don't have a good answer for. So I don't want to come across as saying, oh, there are no objections you can't handle. There's plenty.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do you gauge it in your head whether you can't handle it? And that is an important part of knowing your limits and not wasting your time.
So Can I give you, I know we're running up on
Yeah.
time here,
Yeah,
but
sure,
so
whatever.
in that event, I feel like whether it's a maybe a online course or a coaching program or an actual product, when they say, I've seen this, it costs this much less, not to argue it,
Yeah.
but I know in many cases, especially because I have so many friends who have great programs, and their pricing is it I mean, they know what they're worth. They
Yep.
know the time they put in. And so do you let that go, or do you take time to, not in like a condescending or I'm so great, this is what I'm worth, or kind of way, can is it worth it to explain like the thought behind why this, like, it's a superior product, and which is why it's going to have this higher price point, or this is here's how we determined the cost of this program. Do you go there, or do you just kind of like let it go? Do you ask if they'd be interested in understanding that better?
I think it's always worth going into it. There's been a lot of studies by social psychologists that say the power of the word because is astounding. And in one study it showed using the word because and giving a great reason increases compliance by 60%. And that's staggering. So, yeah, if you want to go into the because of it, as long as the because is valid. So let me add that statement in there. I think it's important for somebody to keep their value and not dilute their brand by negotiating price. But if you do have a price, it's great being able to put it out there. When I tell people my price, it's like you're getting somebody who's done it all over the globe. He's done it for 30 years, 10,000 people. I've got 40 plus recommendations on LinkedIn that are unsolicited. I have CEOs that can back my story. So I am good with the price I offer. And that's my explanation to the people. And
Right.
if they want to go with somebody different, that's okay. I may even be able to recommend someone.
Right.
But yes, Katie, I think it's a great idea to explain why your value prop is what it is and stick by it.
Right. Yeah, you should be confident in that,
Correct.
and yeah, when you are, it is easy to explain. And I know for myself and you, I'm sure it's when you have that confidence, it's absolutely okay for somebody not to be able to or want to spend that money on it,
Right.
but you have that confidence in what it is that you're sharing, selling, providing in services. It's well, for instance, I had an art business. That was my first entrepreneurial endeavor, and I had my price tags way too low, and I had little babies, and I was working so hard and making tons of these signs for weddings, and I have raging ADHD, so I was doing it, last minute all night long
Yeah.
during nap times, until my brother finally sat me down and was like, we have to figure out a pricing for you, because you're killing yourself, and for what,
Yeah. Yep.
and when I had a wedding, uh I don't know, the person who runs the wedding for everybody, that costs an arm and a leg to boss people
Yeah.
around, right?
Yep.
She told me that my prices were too high, and I thought it was really funny. One, because I'm like, you are a glorified like mother-in-law right now.
Right.
Like, this is the
Great.
wedding industry where the markup is insane. Like, I could
Yeah.
easily be asking a lot more money. And so I knew that it was part like she was just trying to negotiate, but I
Yep.
also at that point had such confidence in what I'd be able to provide her, and also that they could get it done cheaper somewhere else, that I was absolutely okay saying, yeah, no, I can lose this sale, but I do know what my time and my abilities are worth.
Right.
And, feel
Yep.
free not to call me again, because I really need to find a different job.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely true.
I love it. Okay, Jake, who do you want to work with? How can people learn from you? Where can I send people? Do you have any kind of small version of this blueprint that I can share with everybody? Because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So I do work with individuals. I have a number of individual clients, and they range from salespeople for, that work a lot on commission and they want to increase the number of sales. So I do work with a lot of individuals. I also work with a number of corporations who are like, we've tried the sales scripts. We're tired of, hiring on more people just because we need to crank out more calls. But I typically don't work with the larger companies. It would have to be an exception. So it's usually 500 people or less with smaller sales teams. And, they have to understand that I'm kind of a rebel trainer. I don't do it like most of the people do. It's based on psychology, and it's not based on repetition.
You're so you are my people.
We have a tribe going.
Yes. I always feel like I'm going rogue trying to train this and teach this. And so I just, I know we had kind of a weird, rough start to today's call, but I appreciate so much that we were able to have this, because I think that what you're sharing, what you're educating on, it's invaluable. I think that it's great that you got to be on my podcast, because I'm pretty sure that, the GEs for PG and E are not, we don't have a whole lot of like the top corporations, but I know right. I have some really amazing small business owners who are just incredible and listening. And the information you gave us in this call alone, like I said, I have 3 pages of notes already. So the clips are going to look weird because I'm going to be like writing, but I appreciate you so much. I think this is amazing. I hope to get to speak with you again.
Yeah, I'd love that.
We can do another podcast on some of these,
sure,
smaller topics.
Yeah.
You're doing good work, and I appreciate it, because I think that this is exactly what can change things, not just for those who are sick of being sold to in the weird ways, but also those who want to start being successful and bringing in, other forms of income and income streams. And sales is an easy way to do it, but you don't have to be weird.
I agree. We just have to get that movement to get larger, Katie, because too many companies are just buying into the email marketing, and it doesn't cost us anything to send out 1 billion messages, and we just need to steer the ship in the right direction.
I totally agree. Thank you so much. This has
You're
been
welcome,
wonderful.
Katie. Thanks for having me. It was a true honor.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, there it is there. Thank you so much for joining us today on Level After Next podcast. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Or if you really don't want to have any FOMO, head over to levelafternext.org, where you can catch up with all the things. Peace out.